Hi and welcome to Leitrim Daily. My name is Breifne and you are listening to Kiss My Arts here on the podcast. It is episode 129 of the show, and I'm not quite sure how to introduce today's guest. There's so many different possibilities you could talk about. Former intercounty footballer, a actor, a writer, a poet, a playwright. But maybe I want to let him introduce himself. Seamus O'Rourke. Maybe you need no introduction to the people of Leitrim at this stage, Seamus.
I don't know. Good morning. No, I don't know what to call myself. People, that's one of the things, you go somewhere and you have to write down your occupation. And I still, in most cases, I still write down carpenter or something like that, because I don't want people to start
thinking of notions,
analysing what you do. And the first thing they say is, I've never seen you on television. And so I just avoid all that. And a strange story, just when we are on this subject, I went to buy a new van a couple of years ago, and I went to two garages and they were mad to sell me. I said, I want a new van. And they were mad to sell me a new van, and they gave me all sorts of options, and they were very interested and spent a lot of time with me. And then they said, are you a builder or what do you do? And I said, no, I'm in the theatre business. And just like that, both of them dropped me like a hot spud, because they thought, well, that man can't have any money for a new van, and there can't be any business doing theatre in this neck of the woods. So anyway, I don't know what to call myself, but I usually just keep my head down and say nothing.
Let's talk first of all about some exciting news. Your first book is out today, as people are listening to the show. Obviously, we're having a chat a few days ahead of time, but this Sunday, you're looking at a lock of poems, recitations, and good ones from Seamus O'Rourke. Where did you get the title from, Seamus? Because it doesn't make sense at all. Or maybe it's completely random.
I was trying to get a title that would say exactly what it is, and that's what it is. Basically, is I was saying, I've said this to loads of people. I said to you earlier, I don't really consider myself as a poet. I think poets are a lot more serious and sadder and more dour than I am, but and they dig a lot deeper. But kind of was trying to avoid saying a collection of poems. So that's the way I'd say. It is a lot of poems and recitations and a few stories that people might enjoy. And the feedback I've had so far is very positive. It's certainly not a heavy read anyway. I was saying to someone, it's kind of the prequel to Peter and Jane, those sort of books.
In terms of, I suppose, giving people a push to maybe get up from wherever they are listening to this morning or this afternoon, if they're listening to the day of release, Sunday, where and what can they find, where and when can they get a copy of this? And how can they get a copy of this today?
Yeah, it's self-published, so it's not going to be in every bookshop in the country, but Mulvey's bookshop here in Carrick have it in stock, and I'm hoping to get it into lots more bookshops locally. You can also buy it online if you go to SeamusO'Rourke.com. The book is online there, so you can just pay by PayPal and it'll be posted out to you. And we're having the book launch today, if this is going out on Sunday, in Mitchell's Bar in Carrigallen at 5:00. And I'm going to, because a lot of these pieces are kind of performance pieces as well, so I'm going to be doing some of the pieces, and I have Fiona Maria Fitzpatrick, a good friend of mine, fantastic singer-songwriter, and another friend of mine from London, John Devine, who plays uilleann pipes, and we're going to put a little show together on the day and have a few signings and a bit of food, and very relaxed evening, hopefully. And then a big row at the end, where we all get drunk and we fall out onto the street. And no.
No, it sounds like an absolutely great
That doesn't
evening.
happen in Carrigallen.
No, not at all. Not at all. In terms of you and growing up in Carrigallen, tell us about Seamus as a boy, as a young man. What was life like for Seamus O'Rourke?
Well, I mean, I always imagined it was like a lot of people's lives. We grew up on a small farm, didn't have a whole lot of money, lived out in I live in a place between Carrigallen and Newton Gore. We always, we didn't have a television to start with. We didn't have an indoor bathroom. We were, but we thought that was very normal. And And our world was very small, and our outlet was basically going to Mass on a Sunday, and once a year we'd go to Carrigallen to see the Carrigallen community players doing their play, and the play would be supposed to be at 9 o'clock, and you'd get there at 9:05, and the play wouldn't start until 10:05, and you'd have to watch them putting up the set, and everything was a kind of very... there wasn't any great sense of professionalism in the production, but the acting and the stories were always great, and I was always fascinated with that. But so there wasn't much to do. You know, we brought the cows to the bull, and we listened to the radio, and we went out to the field in front of the house and played football. And my father wasn't really a footballer. He had huge interest, but you know, we were always provided with a ball, and myself and my brother, that was our passion from a very young age. And I think, you know, we were encouraged at school. Of course, we went to school. I forgot to say that. Yeah,
now and again.
I didn't like school. I just didn't like being told stuff.
Was it being told what to do, or being told?
No, not so much told. I don't know what it was. I didn't. I kind of wanted to find out these things myself, as opposed to being just taught it. And I think to be told that there are these lines that you must stay within, first of all, confused me and didn't sit well with me. And I was talking to somebody recently about this, because I went to do a little talk in a school in Longford there a couple of years ago. Now, I would not be cut out to be a teacher, but this principal asked me to go to the school and talk a little bit about writing and just chatting to the kids. And it was a national school. So we started off with the youngest class, which was about maybe 7 and 8 year olds. And we worked our way up to the 12 and 13 year olds who were ready for the vocational school or secondary education. And I was quite taken aback by how open the really young kids were, and their sense of imagination was so great. And as we got up through the classes, the kids became more reserved and more prim and proper, and in their own eyes thought they were better kids. You know, so when I eventually got to the 12 and 13 year olds, they all sat there like statues, saying, "We are going to listen attentively to you." And I thought, we've actually killed our kids' imaginations. We've somehow made them believe that we must adhere to rules as opposed to using our imagination. So I wasn't up for that. And maybe that was good. That was a good thing. And then I left school when I went on to the vocational school in Carrigallen, and had great teachers there. Eamon Daly from Drumshanbo was the vice principal, and then the principal of the school, and he was my English teacher. And I mean, it's not that he was just a very he was a man who appreciated the arts, and he appreciated English, and he appreciated all these things. And it's not that I was into those things at the time, but it was just, I could see there was hope for humanity when I met these people like Eamon Daly. But I left school as quickly as possible. The minute I was 15, I left school and became a carpenter. I haven't regretted it.
It's a very strange journey, for want of a better word, in terms of 15, leaving school, becoming a carpenter. Obviously, then football became a big part of your life through your early or late teens, early 20s, playing with Leitrim and I suppose with Carrigallen as well at the time. Where do you go through playing county football, being a carpenter, as people would see it from the outside looking in, unfinished education, to where you're now writing books and performing plays? How does that happen? Where does that leap take place, or was it always there in your life?
No, it wasn't. I think the reason I ended up writing stuff was with a view to performing stuff, and that I was asked a similar question, and I was trying to work that out. You know, there was two sides to me. One was I was people mightn't believe this, but I was quite a shy young fella, and I wanted to fade into the surroundings and becoming a carpenter, and you know, you can hide in that world. But the other part of me was, you know, apart from the actual playing of the football, there was a sort of a performer in you that you wanted that stage. I mean, for me, those people say you didn't take to the stage until you were 25, but the 10 years before that, I was on a different stage. It was a little bit too big for me at times, because
I was going to say that, because arguably a much bigger stage in some respects in terms of the numbers watching on a one-off basis.
Totally, yeah, and I think that you know, this has become more apparent in recent times. You know, a lot of footballers are performers, you know, and they want to, apart from, you know, knuckle down and win things for your club and your county, they also want to show off their skills, and in some ways that's kind of been taken out of football now, because if you're one of those people, you're kind of sidelined. It's a bit like the scenario I was talking about at school. We want footballers now to fit into systems and to be good boys, and if you get into trouble, turn back and give the ball to somebody else, and you know, it's become a very safe game, or it's all about facts and figures, and you know, how long we have the ball and all these. So there's not that sense of individualism, I suppose, that I was looking for now. That was all in my head, you know, that I wanted to perform as a footballer. I wasn't good enough, I suppose, in lots of ways. But so when I got a few injuries when I was around 25, and I eventually got myself off the county panel because it was harder to get off it than it was to get on it at the time. And so I had a load of time on my hands, and just it so happened, and that's 30 years ago this year, in 1989, the Cornmill were Carrigallen community players were building a purpose-built theatre in Carrigallen, which was a ludicrous idea at the time. And they also wanted to bring in some young people so that the group wouldn't just die off in lots of ways. So that they came up with a play. Wonderful man and director Gus Ward came up with a play called Gentry, which there was about 30 people in it, and he canvassed around the country. Any young people that he thought might have an interest, he just asked them, and he asked me, and I was asked more because I was a carpenter and that I might help making the sets, and I had access to a van, and I had all those things going for me, and that's how I got asked, and I got a very small part in that play. But the minute I stepped on the stage, there was something wonderful happened, and I said, I want to do more of this, and so although in one part of me was completely shy, the stage was somewhere where you could that wasn't an issue, because you were a character, or I don't know what it was, but it opened up a whole new world for me. And then at the end of that first year, someone said, "Oh, usually someone writes a poem or something at the end of the run, and about what went on over the past few months." And I thought that's kind of that'd be a thing for me to do now. We're having a bit of a party some night, and I might just do a wee poem. And rather than write it down, I was working for myself at the time, and so I was going around, and I was making it up in my head, and so it became very much about the rhythm of it, and so I wrote a wee poem, but I never wrote it down. It was in my head, and I performed it then on this night in question, and it was one of those moments where you can see people going, "I never thought that fella could do that," and all of a sudden you get this confidence that maybe I can do something that I didn't. You know, that I can, because it was a little bit different than, you know, your normal
rhyme and couplets.
Yeah, exactly. So that gave me a little bit of confidence. So I went on then to, just every now and again would pick a subject and start to make up the poem, and always in my head. I never thought of writing it down, and and that's the way the first 3 or 4 pieces that I've ever done, that's the way they came about. So I didn't really write them down until now, some of them.
It's funny because that's where you first came to my attention. I can't remember when it happened, probably sometime around the start of this decade. You did that lovely piece about Leitrim in 1994 and the trip to Croke Park. And that just seemed to be everywhere. Was that the first time, or had you been doing a lot of stuff up to then, or was that when you first came to the public consciousness at least?
I think that was the first time that it came into the larger public. I'd been doing these pieces around home, and I did a couple of bits with, funnily enough, Joe Duffy Joe Duffy had a kind of an off. He had a program. He used to be Joe Gay Byrne's right hand man, and then on a Saturday he would he'd go around the country and go to places like, I think it was the County Hotel. He came to back in the early 90s, and I was asked to go on, and I did a few of these pieces, and they went down well. But of course, back then you had no internet, so you didn't really get any feedback on any of that. And the Leitrim thing in Croke Park, that came about. I had written that obviously in 94, but this was 2 or 3 years later, I think, or maybe even into the noughties, when the local secretary of our local GA club said there's people looking for GA stories, and you might send them in that piece that you did about Leitrim. And so I thought, well, I don't want to send in a written version because
it doesn't have the same effect, really.
It doesn't have the same effect, and I hadn't it written down anyway. And I was wondering how will I get this to them, and I rang them, and they said, well, put it up on YouTube. Now I hadn't. We had the internet, and I was aware of all that, but I just had never done anything like that before. So I put it up on YouTube, and all of a sudden, within a few days, there was 30,000 hits or something on it. And so that was my first experience of something going viral. And so then I thought, right, well, I'll put something up now for the next, because I had a load of pieces that I could do. And so I give myself a challenge that I would put up a piece every day for 10 days. Now, I was scraping the bottom of the barrel towards the end of the 10 days, but I did get up some of those pieces that I had, things like The Wake and stuff that people kind of associate with me now. But that's how it was, the internet really that got me out there. And then when Facebook came along, that was an even easier way to get stuff out there. And to get 80,000 people to watch a video is it's great exposure,
Absolutely, it's every man, woman, and child in Leitrim 2 or 3 times over. When you think about it, so
yeah.
When you think of it just on that scale, it can be huge in terms of the exposure that it gets, but also the profile that you get from it. But that has created the opportunity for you to give up the carpentry essentially and move full time into performing and writing. And how do you see this phase of your life in terms of your career, and or what exactly do you do on a day-to-day basis? Like, what does your life look like? Because you've come in here this morning very relaxed. You don't look like a man that has any stress in his life at all.
Yeah. I get that a lot. You go into, because after I was a carpenter, I went on to manage a couple of businesses, and I ended up in Newtown Gore Engineering, where we did a lot of agricultural sheds and stuff, and so a lot of farmers would know me from there. And one day they were seeing me out in the yard, drenched in rain, looking for some bit of iron or something. And then a few months later, I was supposedly a full-time theatre person, or whatever it is, just like you were asking. And they'd come over to me and they'd say, what does your day consist of? Because there is a thing in rural Ireland, and I have this problem myself, unless you are bogged to your knees in clobber and heading off with something on your back and something in your both hands, then you're not really working. So it's taken me a long time to get over that because I genuinely am I'm busier now than ever I was, because I'm doing something that I absolutely love doing. And if I wasn't doing this on a full-time basis, I'd be doing it on a part-time basis. And if I was retired, I'd be doing this, so, and in some ways that's great, to be so content at what you're doing. But then the other thing is you find it very difficult to take yourself away from it for a week or a fortnight, which I think can be good for a body if one did that. So I haven't had a holiday now in about 3 years, so I think I might be due a few days away.
But you told me you were in Borriscane last week. Is that not considered a holiday now?
Yeah, and I was very well treated in Borriscane last week, but that was for one night only, and I drove back that night, so not sure if it's a complete holiday. But I kind of jumped into this a little bit naively, because 30 years ago when I got the bug for acting, I genuinely had ambitions to become an actor and to become a professional actor. And I had a few opportunities, but in the meantime, I had a family and 3 small kids, and there was part of me saying, you have to be... You can't just run off with the circus, you have to, because even then I was aware that the acting game isn't the steadiest job in the world. And then about, when is it, 2012, I think, a theatre company called Live and Dread were doing a play of mine called Ride On, and I was playing one of the main characters, and they said, will you do this on a, we're doing a 4-week rehearsal, and then we're doing 2 weeks, and then we're going to do a tour, and would you like to be involved? And it's just after the recession had hit, and I was in a job that, I kind of felt I was surplus to requirements, only it was with really good people, and they were keeping me on, but my heart was in the theatre end of it, and I made this mad decision that I would yes, do the play, and I would also be available then for all sorts of other things, and to, because the kids were kind of reared, and so it wasn't as big a risk, I suppose, at the time. But I very quickly realised, you think, I have 4 weeks ahead of me, and then another 2, and that's 6 weeks, and then you realise, what am I going to do after that? And I genuinely, began to panic, because you don't get work as an actor. The amount of times you're going to get a phone call saying, we want you to be in a play in Dublin is
minimal.
And so I began to think, well, I've written a couple of plays, and maybe I should start to sell my own wares, So that's when I decided to write more. And unfortunately, the problem with being a professional is now you have to write plays for 1 or 2 people as opposed to play with 10 people, because you just couldn't afford to do that. So I wrote a few, I started to write, and I genuinely have never been a day idle since I turned professional, if that's the right way of putting that. And
but you've gone a route where, rather than wait for that phone to ring, which, as you say, probably doesn't happen or happens so irregularly you couldn't rely on it to pay for a coffee, never mind pay for a family. So you've gone and you've made your own work. You've gone and actually produced your own plays, got a van that you managed to eventually get a van, and you've gone on the road doing one-man performances where it's essentially just you and a tech guy on a night. So it's a little mini industry in itself. And if you can fill a community hall, like I've seen you do in Leitrim Village on a couple of occasions, if you can fill a hall and keep 100 people in there at the price of a normal theatre ticket, it is really a professional. It's a proper business. It's a proper sustainable business.
Yeah, and I think that, as I said, in my working life, I went from being a carpenter to kind of managing businesses, and I was very aware of how business works, and so that was a real plus for me. You know, I was very savvy when it came to making the whole thing work, and so I kind of created a business that wasn't really there before, and I call it the Travelin Shop. You know, I put my wares into the van, and I bring them around, and if someone wants to purchase, then I will go anywhere. So you know, because there's a lot of people involved, really good people involved in theatre, but they come in at such a young age that theatre is the only thing they know, and they think it's all about hanging around with the right people and being in that circle. And I don't particularly want to be in that circle. I just want to be able to do what I love doing, and be able to afford to do the next thing. And you know, I often say, when I do a show in a community centre somewhere in Leitrim or Cavan or wherever it is, you know, it's not you are not hit by a load of people coming up to tell you how wonderful you are. The first thing you hear is the rattle of chairs. They're taking away the chairs so that we can have indoor soccer tomorrow night, or you know, and that's the community thing. But I like that, because I don't want it to be this. Theatre sometimes gets a bad name because we're all too, you know, we hang too much importance on it. I want it to be something that ordinary people can go and appreciate. And I know there's a bit of a line there where you have to be careful that you don't make it, you don't water it down too much. I'm just trying to take the pomposity out of it, if you know what I mean, and make it more available for ordinary people, and to bring them on a little journey. And I want them to be fairly sure that I am not going to go into some dark place or into some very convoluted world that they have no interest in going, you know, because all of the stuff that I write is about normal, everyday people, and they're the people I want to appreciate it, I suppose.
It's funny because the two plays I've seen you perform in recent years are The Sand Park and Porter Potts' Guide to Walking. Now, both of them are about funerals and about death, but they're two of the funniest performances I've ever seen. So you have this unique knack of making death and what quite morbid subject matter hilariously funny, laugh out loud funny.
You know, I grew up in a house where, you know, there was just always and I think this is a lot of houses, you know, there's a sense of humor within that house. There's a sort of a dry sense of humor in our house and someone else. But, you know, a sense of humor is a wonderful thing to have in a relationship or within a family. And we had that. And so I grew up, you know, always kind of seeing the funny side of things. And some of the earlier things I wrote, you know, recitations and some of the stuff that's in this book, I started out very angry, sometimes with my dad. You know, you got that father-son relationship, and I started out with this angry view. But when I started to put it together in my head, I couldn't help but see the funny side of it as well. So there was always, what I was doing, there was always this mix of comedy and tragedy, for want of a better word. I'm not saying there was anything tragic about my relationship with my father, but you know that I suppose what I'm trying to do within the plays is talk about subjects that aren't really are subjects that we don't like to talk about but need to be talked about, and I use the comedy as I said to someone, I use the comedy as a sort of a handrail for people to hold on to so that we can go to that place. Now, it doesn't always work, because a fella rang me up one day. I was in the van, I was on loudspeaker, and a few people in the van with me, and he came on and he said, you wouldn't have any plays without suicide. And it was a very strange request, but it's because I'm trying to, I suppose, write and mirror what's going on all around me, and all these things are happening whether we like it or not. Now, I know people who recently, you know, who hated the Sand Park because I mentioned chemotherapy, you know, and part of me says, well, if I can't mention chemotherapy, then it's there's not much hope for us, but that's fair enough. There are people who just don't want to.
There are always triggers for certain people, I suppose. Based on life experiences.
And I know that, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm not in any sense setting out to shock people or to bring them to trivialize any of these things, or it's just that I kind of want to talk about it, and but want to do it in a way that is both entertaining and you, and everyone will tell you that the best way to get people to a place is through laughter and sometimes you have roars of laughter, and yet there's tears involved as well, and that's life, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the saddest funeral you've ever been to, you eventually an hour later will see two men standing at the gate, and they'll be having a laugh about something that happened, or maybe the person that has passed away, they have a story about them. And I think that's very important, that we realize that this is only a circle. It's not I'm certainly not trying to make little of people's certain events in their lives. I'm not talking specifically like that at all.
In terms of your work, do you see yourself more as a producer of plays, or as a writer of plays, or a performer of plays? Which aspect of your work do you prefer?
I'm not sure. I love having an idea and going in and looking at a blank page on a computer and saying, let's start here and see where it takes us, and I love that aspect. I love performing. I'm not sure. I genuinely, I'm not sure. That's maybe why I look so relaxed. I genuinely like all of it, and I like the production end of it too, because it's that little bit of business, that I did for so long, and I can still do that. And I'm a very hands-on type of person, so I'm not much used to. I don't bring people in. For instance, the book, I would have formatted that myself and came up with the cover and the design, and there's not I didn't go anywhere seeking help with it, but you can get so much now online, and everything is a little bit simpler. But I'm not sure. I love performing, but I think probably I like that thing of having something written down that's going to be there for eternity,
Will you read one of the pieces for us before you go? I mean, it'd be a shame to have you on the show and not ask you to actually to perform. You don't have to read it, whatever you're comfortable with. You might know something off by heart at this stage.
One of my favourite pieces at the moment is myself and my brother used to. He has the farm at home, and when we were young, there was always he was always mad to help, and I was always very reluctant to help, and so this time of the year, was a horrible time, because you'd start into the fothering season, and there's no slat sheds back then, so you'd be heading off up the hills with hay and all that sort of thing. And because we were young, 14 or 15 around at this stage, and we were playing football, and so it wasn't enough to bring one bale of hay. We used to tie 2 bales of hay together and wrap them around our shoulders, so we were both carrying 2 bales of hay and kind of racing each other up the hills at the back of a bit of land that we had. So this piece is called Faraman. Faraman. I hated spreading top dressing, manure, dung when I was young. Faraman's not for everyone. Oh, I could cock hay all day, shank butts and rake and ted and turn. I love to burn bushes too, and whins and father. Aye, fathering was okay. Run off out through the fields with a back load of hay or bales. Race the brother up Killearn Hill, 2 bales apiece. Sink into your hoss and daub and blue clay. The tramp ground weeping, the silver kings seeping. Killearn's mud all mush and sorrow. ploughing through gaps and collapsed drains, the outlying farm that never quite got reclaimed, the good intentions shamed by cow tracks and whins and briars and scrub and rushes and bushes, only good to burn. That was our song. Me and the brother, he was older and hardier, but I was thick, a big thick head that you couldn't bait with a big stick. It's hard to bait being thick, so Mammy said, and she'd know. She had 4 of us. And for the record, I hated farming, especially spreading dung, no fun. But in the spring of every year, that was our altar. Me and the brother in the top field with a bottle of tea, no water, just tea in a bottle, and heaps and heaps and heaps of dung, all delivered by the 135 and the link box, and a homemade pull-up tailboard, a contraption before its time. The old fella, the inventor of labour-saving devices, except when it came to spreading dung. No, that was done by hand because we had wet land, and spreading dung with the grape helps teenage boys grow. You can't reap if you don't sow, and although we never sowed, we kept spreading the manure. The Leitrim man's version of mass. Not sure if it's doing any good, but keep doing it all the same. In this field we pray and prance about with slightly soiled farmyard compost. Exercise, our bread of life. Feed the land back to itself, like eating your own arm. And as the bottle of tea cools in the small field with the 2 fools and the setting sun, the brothers meet, the work complete, the mounds of dung all now beneath our feet. This as close as ever we'll be, me and my brother in the top field with blistered hands and charred knees. You can have the land, my friend. I look elsewhere for my rainbow's end. Not easy to be found, but there has to be easier ways of falling down. You take the thorny crown, and I'll take my leave and begin my search. You look after the rood and perch, the small holding, the home place, the land of our father's birth. You're the better man, to be fair. And I left my brother standing there, farming.
Wow, I love it. I have heard that before, but it's just it's just phenomenal. I love it. It's really visual, and it just brings you out to that field with yourself and the brother as teenagers. It's great. Congratulations. I love your work. It's great. In terms of, let's go back and just wrap up. I suppose today is the launch of the book. That and others are in the book for people to actually learn themselves.
My greatest hits, my only hits.
But it looks really lovely. A lot of poems, recitations, and good ones by the lad from Leitrim, Seamus O'Rourke, and it's been launched tonight in Mitchell's.
5 o'clock this evening. So you can be home for the hot cocoa. If you're that way inclined.
Absolutely. Well, listen, the very best of luck to you. I know it's going to be an absolute raging success.
Thanks a million.
And the best of luck with everything you do in your own career.
Thank you very much.
That, of course, is Kiss My Arts here on Leitrim Daily. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Seamus for joining me. And, of course, I will be back tomorrow with the sports roundup of the weekend. Talk to you then.